say, why did he duchen? The answer is, Dash be'iro have. Everyone was used to him. Like, he wasn't like a weird guy. Everyone saw him every day, so no one's going to be distracted and have to look at him during duchening because they saw him all the time. So therefore, it's clear that the Gemara there, if they give an example from Rav Huna's neighborhood, it's not talking about the Beit HaMikdash. So Toso says, in the Gemara in Chagiga, when it says not to look at Kohanim who have weird hands, or weird hands, Kohanim shouldn't duchen, that's because Mitzvah Mishum Hesach Hadat. That's because of Hesach Hadat. It's going to be a distraction. It's like, you're not going to be able to concentrate on davening. So if there's like a guy with weird hands, then the audience, can't concentrate because, they want to look at his weird hands.
Oh, so, you want to look.
Right, you want to look.
How would
so
you know he has weird hands?
Yeah, because all of a sudden, you like peek for a moment, and then you're like, whoa, wait a second, look at that guy's hands. It's very strange. So we see that there's two different things about looking at Kohanim. One reason is, in the Beit HaMikdash, it's like the supernatural kind of Shechina type thing. But nowadays, it's because of Hesach Hadat, it's because it is a distraction. And therefore, Tosfot even brings an exciting story from the Yerushalmi. There was a story in the Yerushalmi where there was a person, Rav Chagai, and Rav Chagai was looking at the Kohanim while they were duchening. And Rav Yossi says to him, wait a second, didn't you tell us Asur Listakel b'Kohanim? Didn't you say that you're not supposed to look at the Kohanim when they're blessing the people? Rav Chagai says, Klum Amar Ela Mishum Hesach. He says the only reason is because of distraction. Ana mistakel v'lo misachna daiti. I look and I'm not distracted. I'm not like a 6-year-old kid. I could look at somebody's hands. I'm not going to be distracted from it. So therefore, we see now that the reason, let's call it in non-Beit HaMikdash situations, not to look at the Kohanim, is because you will be distracted. If you're not going to be distracted, then the Yerushalmi says, then don't do whatever you want. Look at the Kohanim. Don't look at them.
Wasn't Yossi blind?
What?
Wasn't Yossi blind?
That's true. But this, I think, is a different one from the Yerushalmi.
Is it in the Beit HaMikdash or while the Beit HaMikdash
No,
stood?
in the Beit HaMikdash. Because in the Beit HaMikdash, they would use the special name of God. That brings down the Shechina. Outside the Beit HaMikdash, you don't
even
have
while
it.
It's stored,
Even while it's stood, because they never use the name even else. Now,
so we can stare right at it.
Wait a second. Not so fast. Now, so therefore, now the tour. The tour now, when it's time to
Next time you're sure that time, you go ahead and stare.
Make this all halachic. He says like this. When the Kohanim are blessing the people, lo yabitu bahem, you shouldn't look at them. V'lo yasichu da'atam, and do not be distracted. So what are you supposed to do? Ella, you eineim kalpei mata. The audience members should have their eyes down, kemisha omed betfilah, like when you're davening. The way, like when you say Shemona Esrei, I guess, or however you daven. V'am yichavnu levracha, and the people have to have kavanah during this whole time. And the Beit Yosef says, the idea is, the Beit Yosef says, that the Kohanim can't have Hesach Hadat, and they can't be distracted, and the audience can't be, no one can be distracted. And he says, V'leika l'meimer dahad asu l'istakal b'Kohanim lo mishum Hesach Hadat, and the Beit Yosef explicitly in that says, do not think that the reason not to look at the Kohanim has nothing to do with being distracted, but it's because of the Shechina. And you're going to go blind, like it says in Chagiga. Beit Yosef says that's wrong. That's the wrong reason, because that is only in the Beit HaMikdash, because they would use Shem HaMeforsh. Outside of the Beit HaMikdash, that does not apply. And the Drisha stresses the same point. He says, why does the Beit Yosef have to make such a big deal about this? Because you might think, as sometimes happens, that there's a machloket between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. You might think that the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, says don't look because of distraction. But the Babylonian Talmud says don't look because of spiritual reasons, and maybe they're in conflict and the Bavli wins against Yerushalmi. It says don't think that way. It's the Bavli is talking about Beit HaMikdash, Yerushalmi is talking about non-Beit HaMikdash, and that, the Beit Yosef says, is the halacha. Now, we will see, though, the Beit Yosef, adds one exciting thing. And he says, now the Beit Yosef of Yosef Karo, is from Cairo, he's from Egypt. V'nohagin ha-kohanim be'eretz Mitzrayim. In Egypt, the Kohanim have a custom. L'shalshel talit shel mitzvah al pneihem. Ve'yedehem. They drape the talit down over their face and their hands. Uminhag yafehu. And that is a great minhag. Kidei, why do you think that's such a good minhag? Let's hear from, what do you guys think? Why do you think he would say that's a great
Eliminates
minhag?
the problem.
What?
Eliminates the problem.
Eliminates the problem for who?
The
audience.
For the folks. Yeah, look what he says. He says, but you know what it also eliminates? Also the Kohanim shouldn't look at the people. Because the same way, if the people look at the Cohanim, they're going to get distracted. The Cohanim is going to look at the people and he'll get distracted because there's a guy in the audience who looks funny there. So therefore, it goes both ways. So he says it's great for the Cohanim to cover their hands because then people will not have Hesach Hadat from them. They do not way, and the audience members covering themselves up Ashkenazic way, and we're mixing two things, and we're like double bagging where you don't have to. I mean, it's like it's very much extra, and you don't really have to do it at all. What? Let's get to the Mishnah Berurah. Now let's look. Now we get to the very exciting part, which is the Mishnah, the Shulchan Aruch. Let's see what the Shulchan Aruch says. The Shulchan Aruch says this is in Kuf Chaf Chet Chaf Gimel. He says, "B'shasha kohanim mevarchim." When the kohanim are saying their bracha, ha'am lo yabitu v'lo yisichu da'atam. The people should not look and not be distracted. Also, is the distraction? He wants to emphasize that. Ela yu'einem kalpei matam. Their eyes should just look down, like when you're davening. Okay, very nice. Ve yu pneim keneged pnei kohanim. And you have to face the kohanim. It's important to be face to face. Okay, v'lo yistaklu b'hem, but not look at them. Okay. Now he says like this. The Rema adds, Gama Kohanim lo yistaklu b'yadayim. The Kohanim shouldn't look at their own hands. Therefore, the Kohanim cover their face and put their hands out. Very nice. And then and he says in other places, the Kohanim put their hands under the talit as well. So there were two ways to do it. Very nice. Now let's see what the deal is in the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says, Hatamhu, the reason is shelo yasichu datam. It all has to do with distractions. And he says, and therefore, of course, lo yistaklu b'makom acher. Therefore, you shouldn't look to some other place, right? Like if you're saying, I better not look at the Kohanim, and then, look out the window. That's really awful, because then you're like purposefully distracting yourself. So that can't be. Umidina, now the Mishnah Berurah says. Now let's start with what's the real halacha. Eino asur ela bistaklut merubeh. It only is a problem if you stare, looking a lot. Because then you're going to be distracted. Like you're really looking, fingernails, whatever it is, yes? Then you could be distracted. If you look a little bit, then it's okay. A glance, that's okay. And he says that only in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, when they would say the Shema Meforish, the name of God, and the Shechina, then you couldn't even glance, because you could get zapped by the Shechina even in a glance. But, which we don't do, we don't have that today. However, the Mishnah Berurah says, but there is a Zeicher LaMikdash, to remember how it was in the Beit HaMikdash time, we shouldn't even look for a little bit at all. Okay, so there you go. What? This is right. This is after Tisha B'Av, and we say we're waiting again. So that's right. You could say that kind of a thing. And he says, and minhag zeh yoter nachon, and he says that's a very nice custom for the Kohanim to put the talit over their face and stick their hands out. So therefore we have this kind of an idea. But again, if the Kohanim covered their hands with the talis, there's really nothing, no reason for an audience member to have to do anything special. But
let us know. That way anymore?
What?
Does anybody do that anymore?
That what?
Cover their faces but not their hands.
Cover their face, but I've never seen it. Although, clearly, this is a very big deal.
We wouldn't have seen it.
What?
How would you see it?
No.
Unless you were cooking.
Well, I don't cover myself with the towels. So. But anyway, that's something that started shifting in the 1500s. And that's a huge thing, Josh. No, see, I'll tell you what happens. We're going to see in a moment, what happened was that clearly, this is the big controversy here now is like this, that clearly in the time of the Gemara, no one thought of this very exciting solution to the problem, which is, hey, why don't we just cover people with talises? Hey, in the Beit HaMikdash, we don't want to make people blind. Why don't we just cover our hands with talises?
Were they not wearing talises?
I don't know. What about the audience members? Why didn't they cover themselves with a talis? So, at some point, the tour doesn't, at some point, the Beit Yosef and the Darkei Moshe, they both say, hey, by us, people cover themselves with the talis, or the Kohanim do it. That's all the 1500s. What happened up until then that nobody thought to cover themselves with a talis? I'll tell you why. The Rav Yaakov Emden